I think we can all agree that the Nintendo Switch is a phenomenal handheld slash console, and even to this day, almost 6 years into the lifespan of the Nintendo Switch, I still recommend it to my friends and family members. And whenever I do add a little bit of a caveat, just saying, hey, you might experience something that is called Joy-Con drift, and then I have to go into explaining what Joy-Con drift is, and it just becomes this whole conversation. If you're watching this video, chances are you already know what Joy-Con drift is, but for those of you that don't know, Joy-Con drift is essentially the wearing and tearing of the actual analog stick as you game on it. The way that these potentiometer based analog sticks wear down is by having the carbon that is on the X and Y axis wear down as you game on. Now, there's still going to be a spring that is there that'll go ahead and kind of snap back the joystick into that dead center area, but that registration or that value that is sent into the system will be a little bit off, because as the carbon dies down, the drift is going to begin and your character is going to start moving either forward, backwards, or whichever direction that things start to wear down over time. But the technology to fix this has been around forever. Guys, this is something that is called Hall Sense technology, and Hall Sensing JoySticks operate similarly to regular potentiometer-based analog sticks. The only difference is that instead of having carbon pads tell the computer or essentially your Switch, this is where I'm going and this is the direction that I'm going, you have magnets. And magnets will last a lot longer than the carbon pads that you find in potentiometer-based analog sticks. While I was doing research, I found out that the Dreamcast controller actually had Hall Sensing joysticks instead of potentiometer-based ones, so they lasted way longer. And in fact, if you have one, chances are it still works 100% fine in comparison to Joy-Cons that you got a couple months ago. Now that you know the difference between potentiometer-based analog sticks and Hall Sensing joysticks, now we can talk about the GuliKit King Kong 2 Pro controller. When I first saw it hit the market, I kind of just saw it as, it's another Xbox ripoff, and called it a day. But when I reviewed the 8BitDo Ultimate Bluetooth controller, I realized the potential of having Hall Sensing joysticks, and I wanted to see what this was all about. It hit the scene and made a huge splash, but I really wanted to see whether or not it was worth it. Recently, I put a poll on the community poll asking people what they thought the best third-party controller manufacturer was, and I was kind of surprised to see GuliKit really relatively low in comparison to everything else. I mean, 8BitDo is obviously doing a lot of things to get their name out there and get their brand out there, but they also build phenomenal controllers. When it came to GuliKit, I was a little bit hesitant, especially seeing the price tag of $69.99. Now, I went ahead and I bit the bullet. I paid for it with my own money, and when it first came, I was relatively surprised at the overall quality and feel of this controller. Guys, this has this almost like matte, soft plastic feel to it. It definitely borrows a lot from Xbox's pages in terms of design, ergonomics, and just overall feel of the controller. But when I really started playing with it, it felt different, and I couldn't really peg too much as to why it felt different. I started doing a little bit more research. Turns out that the buttons, they're all mechanical, or at least they feel like a mechanical button. It's completely different than what you would see in a regular controller, because there's typically a membrane that you push down that makes contact, and that goes ahead and sends the signal to whatever console, PC, or whatever it is that you're gaming on. When it came to this, it just felt more like playing with a keyboard, or there was a little bit more click to it, so to speak. There was just more pressure that needed to put in, and it was very satisfying in comparison to playing with other controllers. The D-pad felt okay. It didn't feel like anything that was anything to call home about. Personally, I still think that 8BitDo makes a much better D-pad than anything else on the market. But when it came to the analog sticks, it just felt really good, guys. It felt absolutely awesome. I was using it to play on the Nintendo Switch as well as PC, and overall the changing between one platform to another was seamless thanks to that button at the top that goes ahead and just lets you switch modes very quickly without any issues at all whatsoever. I was able to connect it to my Android phone, and I was able to play Xbox Game Pass on the go, which felt really, really great. Whenever I was playing on the GuliKit controller, it didn't feel like it was that much of a difference in comparison to the Nintendo Switch Pro controller when it comes to actually moving your characters with the joystick itself. But when it came to the GuliKit controller, it felt like I needed to just push a little bit further and a little bit harder in comparison to a regular analog stick. I don't know if that's just because of the way that the Hall Sense joysticks are built in comparison to the potentiometer based ones, the analog ones, but when it came down to it, it still felt really good to use. It felt very clicky, very responsive, and I didn't really have too much of a problem. And all it took took was a little tiny bit of a move in order for your character to respond on screen. So you can tell that there's a very little of a dead center, a dead zone that's in the middle of the actual joystick itself. The controller has NFC support, so if you use amiibos to play games or whatever, unlock any extra things, you can go ahead and just tap it, boom, it works just like it would on a regular Switch Pro controller. I haven't had any issues with it with using NFC. And you can also use the controller to wake up your Nintendo Switch. So if you have it connected and you have it someplace else, I don't know, wherever in your living room, you can just pick it up, wake up your Nintendo Switch, and game on from there. This is something that I feel most third-party controllers are finally realizing that, oh man, people actually want that. We saw that with the 8BitDo Ultimate Bluetooth controller, and obviously this came out before it. So I'm glad that people are doing that and that third-party manufacturers are taking that into account. The gyro on the GuliKit King Kong 2 Pro controller, man, that's a long name. It feels good, it feels fine, but it's not quite as accurate as the Nintendo Switch Pro controller, and that makes sense. It's first party versus third party, but honestly, I wouldn't use the King Kong 2 Pro controller for gyro, even on PC. There is an option for that. I mean, if you're using that on PC, you might as well use mouse and keyboard. It's probably much more accurate. But when it comes down to it, it felt nice. So if you're playing Splatoon 3 or whatever it may be where you need gyro, you'd be okay with it. And it would obviously take a little bit of adjustment to things. You can actually adjust the sensitivity of the gyro. You can adjust the vibration and how strong that vibration feedback is. The only thing is that there's no actual like ramp up or ramp down when it comes to the vibration. It's just straight up from 0 to 11 very quickly, and it just doesn't really have that in between, so to speak, whenever you're in the middle of things. Overall though, it is relatively nice. I like being able to have that customization. I wish that there was some form of program on Windows or Mac that you can go ahead and go into and adjust things. That would be much more convenient and much nicer for me personally in comparison to just having everything happen on the controller itself, because I'm finding myself having to look back at the instructions and see that manual and be like, oh, okay, this is the button combination that I need to have in order to make sure that I get everything adjusted and fine-tuned just right. You can also adjust the sensitivity of the triggers themselves on the controller, but frankly, that's more geared towards PC gamers than it is Nintendo Switch gamers, because Nintendo Switch, unless you're using a GameCube controller for GameCube titles, it really doesn't necessarily matter, because even on the Nintendo Switch Pro controller, those aren't actual analog triggers, they're just button triggers that you just push. All of the customization options that are available for you with this controller all revolve around this center button. Once you push that button in combination with any of the other buttons that are laid out, there are different options that pop up that you can go ahead and use and adjust, and it is all based on vibration feedback with the controller itself. Frankly, it's kind of nuanced, and this is why I want some form of software so that I can go ahead and see, oh, this is what I'm adjusting, let me go ahead and fix things. And I feel like it's just more convenient, and I like having that visual feedback, whereas I don't really know whether or not I'm in a controller menu or I'm adjusting the triggers or I'm adjusting the vibration or whatever it may be with the controller itself. I'm assuming that over a long period of time after gaming on this controller, I will eventually get used to it and I'll just know more or less what it is that I'm doing with the controller itself. But frankly, as of right now, as a newcomer, it just feels like it, I don't know, is a bit of a hassle in terms of everything else. I do want to mention that I don't like the placement of the plus and minus buttons on the controller. I felt like the placement was just too high up on the face of the controller. Whenever I wanted to push them, I had to kind of almost overextend or overreach in order to actually push them. And I feel like I have, you know, relatively large hands. So in comparison to my wife and my son, it felt like they had to kind of like almost overreach in order to get that done. I found myself accidentally pushing the home or the share button while I was gaming, and that just added a whole slew of problems and breaking of immersion whenever you're playing anything, instead of actually pausing or hitting the select or minus button on this controller itself. GuliKit has taken advantage of this momentum in the gaming industry as being seen as this Hall effect or Hall Sense joystick manufacturer, and they have started manufacturing replacement joysticks for all sorts of platforms, including the Steam Deck, which I actually just got these today, and I haven't installed them yet, but I do want to go ahead and install them. GuliKit actually recently released the Nintendo Switch Joy-Con joystick replacements that actually have the 3D Hall effect sensors built into it, so that way you don't have to worry about drift anymore. Fortunately, it's currently sold out. It's out of stock on Amazon, so I have to wait until that comes back in stock, and once that happens, I'll go ahead and I'll buy it and replace the joysticks that I have on my Nintendo Switch right now. But if you have this controller, let me know what you think in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, or if you have any questions that I could answer for you. If you want to go ahead and hear my thoughts on the 8BitDo Ultimate Bluetooth controller, then click this video right over here. And if you want to hear my thoughts on the Nintendo Switch OLED 1 year later, then click this video over here. I will go ahead and see you guys on the next one. So nice, guys. Peace.